so we might as well get started. This is a special session, kind of a work session, and there are a few telephone numbers that if we could have them identify themselves so we know who is on, we would appreciate that. We have a area code 801-573-9181. Zach, that's you. Zach, your audio is not, or your audio is not working.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's good.
That's why the phone number's there. That's my phone number because I dropped my computer and smashed the speaker. So there you go.
Okay, that explains it. And I really don't see anyone else that is just a telephone number. But anyway, we appreciate everyone being here. And who's going to make the presentation for Fremont Island?
So I think I will. And then Nate, if you have a screen share, Nate, where you can pull up the materials, that'd be great. Do you have the ability to do that, Nate?
Okay, Nate, you need to unmute as well.
There we go.
One more time, Nate.
Oops. All right, do you hear me this time?
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm actually on my cell phone, not my laptop. So I'm not sure how to do it on my cell phone. I can try.
Let me see.
Hey, David, are you about to be consumed by a grizzly? Am I seeing that right?
Yes, I'm up in Alaska right now, and this bear is trying to eat me. No, actually, my kid, honestly, he just flew up to Alaska to go in and go fishing for a couple of days. How would it be, huh?
Well, I think that would be good.
Yeah.
Probably safer than going to a courthouse in Portland. So.
Yeah. No. True that. True that.
All right. So Nate, I think you can turn it over to me, right? Show my screen.
Yes, I'm not the meeting host. The city is, so they'd have to give you the permission to do it.
Sorry, my assistant is in Alaska also. I think everybody's had enough of human population. She was like, I'm out of here. I think while we've got the time and we're not going to burn through people's evenings, how about I'll just start going through the presentation? Because
that sounds real. I think we've got a good number of our city council on. I see several members of our planning commission.
Perfect.
Our engineers here, Public Works is on, so I think we're good to go.
Perfect. We'll just start. So, high level, thank you, everybody. I know this is like once again a strange thing, and thanks for coming out for those of you that came out on the Razor Tour, and so you can get an idea of what Fremont Island is. And it's funny, the owners and I keep going back and forth on what exactly this looks like, and we actually got a lot of good questions that helped us kind of think about where we were at. And I think I want to start at a high level. I think our first question is access, right? How do we actually get access to the island? And that's probably a series of federal and state permits connecting to the causeway across the sandbar as one option. And then, talking to a couple different water conservancies and different kind of players in the Weber Davis County area, the idea of creating a secondary Willard Bay, and using one of the walls for the secondary Willard Bay to basically create another form of access, was kind of a surprising idea I had. I mean, that was given towards me from other players within the county. And so, from a high level, I think the easiest path is trying to get a permit across the existing access and just expand the current easement across the sandbar, and then build out a wide enough road. And I'll let Nate jump into kind of the mechanics of access and secondary access with that size of road and what we'd have to do.
Yeah, so what we're envisioning is so that we can obtain two forms of egress, is to have the causeway split into two different roadways. So we'd have a directional in on the road, a landscaping area in between, and then a directional out. So that way that if in case of emergency, they could all become an out, or an in if it needed to be, satisfying our understanding of the International Fire Code and what we've done on other projects for directional, two forms of egress with directional access.
So Bill, just really quickly, let me explain something to you that'll help you with that, okay? It's probably a good time to tell you right now so we don't forget. On access, and believe me, I'll work with you, so I'm not saying I wouldn't work with you, but how access works is you need two accesses, right? Okay, so what you need is you take Fremont Island and you do a diagonal, you take half the diagonal, and those accesses have to be that far apart. Does that make sense?
Correct. So what our understanding is, we've researched it, is what we were planning on, and we'd love to work with you on it further, is when they come to the island, the connection point onto the island would be at different locations, but they would come back onto the causeway themselves.
Well, we'll look at everything, but there's like a little game I play where if I take a pin or a little crayon, if I can plug up a spot, then you have to show me how you're going to get the fire truck there. And so if right where you come down Antelope Island on that causeway, if you start off together, I can block that and you can't get a fire truck out there. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you have a solution. We have tons of solutions. One solution is someday we might just have to put a station out there. Okay, that's one. Another solution is we look at, I don't know, different options, and maybe we'll just have to do a variance or something. But I just wanted you to understand that diagonal. But it sounds like you have a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and we've worked with that as well, but we appreciate the input, and we'll certainly continue to work with you.
Okay, and other than that, I'll shut up and just listen. Sorry.
No, the whole point is to have a discussion here, right? Because we came away with, the same thing. How do you, if you have an emergency, how do you ensure access? If you have a fire, how do people get off, or on, right? So I agree with you. I think the next issue is going to be utilities, right? And, we have a couple different ideas on that. And I think Nate's going to kind of walk through all the possible options we have beyond just hauling utilities out to the site. I think for sewer especially doesn't make a ton of sense. And then I'll let Nate talk from here.
Yeah, so I mean, the main ones that I see are sewer, water, power, and gas. And again, economically, we've looked at a couple different options. Let's take gas, either doing propane on site or actually working. We have been in contact with Questar Gas about running a main line to the island. We're looking at both options of just economically at this point. At this point, it is looking to probably just run a main line through Questar out to the island. Sewer, again, just like what Zach Hartman had mentioned, either just going off the treatment plant there within Davis County, running a line out, or look at doing an on-site community treatment facility on-site. The economics behind that, as well as connection, is still being evaluated, as well as grades. We know we can't gravity it out. We would have to force main pump it out. Again, the economics of it and topography and soil acceptability, we are looking to pump out. Water, we are looking to do wells on site, and in the process of securing water rights for those wells. And power, again, working with Rocky Mountain Power. RMP says there will be some major facility upgrades, but they're very willing to work with us on power.
And I think as far as emergency services on site, I think once we have the access and utility issue covered, I think we're gonna have to figure out what that additional cost is, because there may be a special assessment for the people who live on the island. If there's 100 people out there, and that's a pretty big additional cost to cover that extra additional ground. We'll probably figure that's something that has to pass an exaction test. But that probably doesn't make sense to have a big increase in the city's budget to cover, a few, not as many people at the beginning. And so that probably something has to be subsidized by the developer as we work through this. I was curious after the tour if anybody else had any other ideas of kind of the three paths we thought we would go down. Where we think, is it a true development? Is it a private development? Is it partially conserved? Is it fully conserved? I was just wondering if anybody had any opinions, because like I said, we're still working our heads around this as well. So.
Well, when I have two different thoughts. One, if something's really buildable, I mean, can you really build something on it that has all the amenities necessary to take care of everyone that's going to live out there?
Yep.
Which to me is a little different than a developer. Sometimes you have to develop something in order to make it buildable, right? So I don't know if that's making a lot of sense to you, but I look at it at two different. I don't look at a developer as a builder, because it's like two different things to me.
Oh yeah. No,
So
I agree with you 100%. Sorry.
Well, so where I was going, I didn't mean to take my picture off, but where I was going with that is the development side of things just seems overwhelming to me. I mean, because usually there is some resource, there's a starting point. There's a starting point to where, okay, this is a resource we can develop and it gets us somewhere. That's the part that I'm still looking for. The view was beautiful. Any direction you look, it was beautiful to look at. But when it comes to resources that can be developed, that was way over my head, because I just didn't. That's what you're addressing here with these four areas. But so no, it would take someone to paint a different picture in my mind than what I saw when we went out there, as far as developable resources. That's just my thought.
I think that's a really astute view, because in Utah, most of the developers and builders are what I would call subdividers, right? They go out, they buy a parcel, they subdivide it, they create homes. In places like Texas and the Inland Empire, in California, they have, what they're called master plan community developers, right? And really, there's only about 10 of those in the entire United States. And we only have one in Utah, really, and that's Daybreak, right? And Daybreak had to reclaim, $250 million landfill, kind of waste pile cleanup. And they had 4,200 acres to deal with, which is about the same size as the island. And they were able to kind of create everything from scratch when they did it and cover the cost of the remediation, right? And so it is a different person that does this, that comes in and says, hey, we have to have community planning, community programming, sustainable water systems, but we can't take this from the landowner step to where we audition and bring in the best in class master plan community developers until we kind of get a base footing of what's possible. Because most of these players are pretty busy across the country. But in my mind, if we go forward, the partner on this is going to be someone that's done this before, where, we had nothing but a field and then the city came up 10 years later. And that's the way I agree with you. That's the vision someone has to have. And it's not a talent that exists with every developer in Utah. Anyone else? Just it's good feedback for us because it's nice to be able to have this dialogue, right? Helps us see how our partner feels about these ideas. Because I'm still on the fence about what's the right thing to do.
Zach, I'm curious about, you said on-site wells for water. When we were out there before, you mentioned that they had drilled a couple of wells and the water that they got to was kind of brackish. But then when they went deeper,
Yep.
they came up with oil. So how deep, how far down do you think you're going to have to go to get to palatable water?
I don't know.
Is it feasible?
Well, not to build two houses, but if we can build enough houses, then even if we're pumping the water along a pipeline, that's one way, and the other way maybe we're doing a desal. But the amount of studies we're gonna have to pay to do this, to put together, we kind of have to some security that we'd be able to actually do it if we were able to. Does that make sense? There's a chance we agree to this idea that this many homes should go here, and we start going down the process of, trying to collect water, trying to build, and the bottom line is the bridge is too expensive because by the time I give a cooperative break point, or the water's not available, or the water's too expensive to get to, or it's not consistent enough. But before we start spending the money and rowing down that river, I want to make sure if we get to the right destination, we all are going to the same place, if that makes sense. That's fair. Because it is, your question is, I'm just as concerned about it as you are, right?
Well, I understand your analogy. And you said, how many homes are you going to need to service? I mean, obviously 2 houses isn't going to make it worth your while, but how many will make it worth your while?
I don't know. I think the idea is, Daybreak's density is about 5 per acre as on a gross basis, right? Averaged out. And I kind of know what the land residual comes off of that and what their upfront costs were to start that project. And that project worked, and it was institutionally financed with public money, meaning publicly traded companies, private companies funded most of the dollars, Rio Tinto, and then when they resold it to Varde, and we actually handled that transaction when it was resold to Varde. Same thing, that became private money, privately held money that took it over.
Okay, that's out there quite a ways. Do you have an idea? Do you have a number that you're tossing around that says, okay, for this to be financially feasible, we need to have X amount of units out there?
Yeah, 5 units to the acre across the site, and Nate, we're like 3,500 acres.
Correct. Yeah. When we went out there with Mayor Green and with Mike, the past planner at the city, Yeah, we were talking numbers right around 10 to 12,000 homes.
10 to 12,000 homes? Is that what you
Correct.
said?
Yep.
Yes.
Units.
Units.
Yep.
Units. So whatever form that unit takes, but yes, 10 to 12,000 doors.
Yeah. Some will be larger estate homes and some will be apartment style dwellings that, you know, especially where some of the stuff wraps around the cliffside. And really, you know, if we picture future development there, it's going to be kind of like a Cinque Terre hillside, right? Where you can, that's an affordable way to build up against a steep hillside and get the views of the lake and kind of create better product.
Yep. Sorry, do you have a median price point of these dwellings that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think for to be reasonable on the island, we have to be comparable with Weber County pricing. So, you know, I think we're going to be in the 250 to the 1.1, right, range, depending on what product type. And I think the core stuff is going to be 300 to 500,000 by the time we're done out here. But, you know, I've done a lot of development in Weber County. I'm from Ogden. I mean, I don't think this is a place. I'm not really thinking to price out the average citizen of Weber County. I think that's a business mistake. And so the idea is to put enough units in there that it works, right?
And commercially, what types of businesses, if any, do you envision having out there that would pull people out to the?
I hope not. I hope none, other than like restaurants to service, grocery to service. If there's enough people out there, they need medical service or a CPA. But the idea is the commercial services are probably back closer to Antelope. Because you look, a big problem when you do commercial development that you're on a shoreline. I mean, essentially, you only get 180 degrees of service, right? You don't get a grab from a 360 degree service. Like you look how you know, Station Park does well because its MSA pulls very far north and very far south, even though it's a fairly tight choke point, right? And I think, you know, the citizens that would end up living on the island, they'd probably be contributors to coming off the island and buying residential stuff beyond convenience, right? I think, you know, restaurants and stuff like that, maybe a hotel, but, you know, the question is, how open is this to the public, the rest of the island? And then the other question is, how private is the island? And that's kind of like a, you know, the madness that we continue to see across the country. You know, there might be a great appeal for this being private, right? And everybody knowing exactly who their neighbor is and a gate, you know, kind of enforcing that.
And so really that's one of the main questions that we would like to get from the city tonight is more just some feedback, some open discussion on should it be open to the public or should it be closed to be a private island with that same number of residential units on the island?
If it's private, it makes it a lot easier when we create impact fees and impact fee studies because the exaction test is easy to put together. The schedule is easier. The other citizens in HOOPER can't say that, you know, the island's causing them additional cost and money because we'll have a separate line item. And it'll make it easier to do, but then they don't get any of the benefit of the island being developed, right? Just, you have to be an owner to have that benefit. And that's the part I'm wrestling with, you know, a little bit.
So you're saying if the island is designated as private and a gated community per se, then the impact fees to the remainder of HOOPER citizens would be less because the impact fees would be absorbed by the owners or the people that dwell on the island.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. So at Daybreak, if you sell a home that's the exact same size in Daybreak and you go walk 15 feet into Anthem, which is not part of Daybreak, the impact fee stack is about half per Daybreak. But in exchange for that, Daybreak has to pay for a bunch of other things that they're in charge of because they're in charge of it, right? It's their responsibility. And it's kind of what was created in their development agreement. There's an advantage at the end, but there's an expense up front. That's something we come to terms with as we start designing it, right? So, because we may come to this and I'll be like, hey, should this be a city park? And you're like, well, the city doesn't want to take on debt and we don't want to write a check for that, and I'm like, okay, we'll pay for the check, and this mechanism finds a way for it to come back into public hands. And this mechanism keeps it private. But at the beginning, we kind of have to figure out what's everybody's desire and wishes, right? And then try to pencil something that covers that.
So then on the flip side of that coin, if it's not private, if it's not a gated community, it's not private, then what benefits are offered to the people that live up here on the mainland of Hooper?
Yeah, that's my question, right? I think that a huge portion of the island should be open to the public, because I think it's a valuable piece, and I think we're running out of pieces of good land nearby our houses as the state grows. And I think that it's a big benefit if there's a parkway or a path or something that connects it so people can ride their bikes or walk or hike or drive their UTV. I mean, maybe it's an off-road trail park where razors can catch, and there's a path that drives around through the island. I don't know what, but I think why we get to speak at a high level, what would the citizens of Hooper really enjoy? And when I drive through it, there's a fair amount of off-road recreational vehicles that have to go on a trailer to get any use, right? And
right.
and
what
that
about,
could be something, right?
You talked also about a proposed marina in one area out there. Is that something that you would keep private or public?
I mean, it just depends, right? So if it's private, you can amenitize it, you can price it in with the houses, right? And it becomes something you get to sell. If it's public, then it's a draw and it creates traffic, right? And maybe it's something the city participates in the cost or rallies in the approval process and helps us politically with some of the other approvals we have to get. If I was here and I was just dreaming about things, the island would be about 70% public with well-designed trails and 30% pretty dense development. And then we'd create some separate Willard Bay entity between where Hooper is on the east side and have some freshwater connection. And because I think that it creates great value, and I think that the citizens of the area would really like it. Whether or not I can pull off that Disneyland idea, that's to be figured out. But if you're asking what do I want, I think that's what I want. I just don't know if it can be done.
So your vision, if I understand right, then is to maybe, like you said, do a dike or a wall to create a freshwater Willard Bay scenario between the island and the west end of mainland Hooper?
That's my dream. If there was a way to do that without damaging some of the saltwater habitat, right? That's pretty critical. And so I think, Willard Bay's found a way to do that in part. I think there's the lake is receding a certain amount per year, and that's a real thing. And if we can find some way that mitigates and helps with the health of the balance of the Great Salt Lake, something where we get the Nature Conservancy and other NGOs on board, along with Weber Basin water, if we can find better ways to store the fresh water that comes out and get a little more use out of it. And I'm fairly certain the citizens of Weber County and of Hooper would be excited to have another lake that wasn't as crowded nearby. I think that'd be a bonus that was a little more usable than the Great Salt Lake. And I'm not saying it's in its entirety, but for a portion, right? And when you build those dikes and those dividers, that becomes more of a federal and also, water service, cost. And then we share the cost with them, but then there's a lot more benefit because you got a freshwater dock, right? And that's going to raise the price of everybody's land along the shore and everybody's land on the island, right? But that's me dreaming big, and I'm not really willing to go out there just yet and say that's what I want. But behind closed doors, that's what I'm working on, right?
Well, absolutely. If you were able to create freshwater waterfront properties, I mean, that is a dream big.
And I get all the non-governmental agencies and environmental groups to get on board with it because we sustained the water levels that are declining, that are destroying all the habitat. That would be a double-double. But because of all the work we did on the inland port and some of the final settlement work we're doing with National Audubon, I feel like I've got good enough relationships with those groups that they, under the right deal, they might get behind it.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's pretty Walt Disney, but
Yeah.
got to start somewhere.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, is there any feedback from the city on just some initial opinions on private or public? Or partial?
We won't.
We won't hold you to it. We're just looking for really just some general feedback.
Because the next round of this becomes really expensive for us. And so if we don't have a good gauge on where you're at, we just light money on fire. So that's if we had a partner that was like, we could get to this, we're all going to this point and we were working on it together, that's a lot easier to go spend money on than, well, we want to find a way to tell you no, but we haven't found a way to tell you no. I'd rather just be told no. So it's cheaper that way.
Well, in my opinion, I appreciate this gathering here and opening it up to the public. And I can see we've got a few citizens here as well. So they can hear what's being said. But I think City Council and Planning Commission need to meet and discuss the pros and cons. I don't think we can come out right now and say, hey, we love it, or hey, we hate it. You know what I mean? But we've got.
I totally understand that.
But it is good to hear your new ideas and things that the way you're promoting it or wanting to.
It's either a dream big or it's a public park. That's kind of where I've come to. It's nothing in the middle, right? And that's where my brain's at, and I can't get beyond that. So, because the costs are just so great to build one home out there. Like if I just said I want to build one house, it costs so much money just to build one house. I might as well build, 15,000. So,
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna have to get an investment group that would do a Walt Disney type deal, right? Like that's gonna require, there's gonna have to be some greed to back the imagination.
Okay. I don't know that I have an answer for you. I don't have any feedback other than my own personal opinions, and I've already asked those questions. So I really think our elected officials and our appointed officials need to put our heads together and discuss it in detail. And, based on what you've told us, then get back with you with an answer. I don't think it's something we can answer tonight. That's for sure.
Oh, didn't think you could. I don't even think I could. Right? It is kind of like a moving target, right?
Yeah.
But if that's all the questions and kind of where we're at, if you guys want to round up and just let us know, we're still high level because kind of next steps are really expensive and really painstaking and a lot of work. And, if you guys were 50-50 on it, we'd probably work towards making it a park. And if you were 80-20, that might be a different story. So
you say make
a free vote today. It's not. When
you say making it a park, I mean, are you serious about making it a park, or what do you mean by that? Or are you just being facetious?
I don't know. No, I'm not. I'm not being facetious. In my brain, that land has more value to the citizens as a recreational item than it does for 15,000 homes. As by the time I do all the entire land residual analysis, right? Now, if there's no public participation in that park and there's no willingness to kind of take it down that path, then going down a development path is perfectly fine, right? Because there's not a lot of money in parks unless there's a public need, right? But I think I just look at it and I'm like, I had never been out there, and then once I went out there, I was like, this surely makes the area, and then I've sold homes up in down Gentile and Antelope for 20 years off and on, right? Like I know the area. It just made the area feel a lot bigger to me, right? Being out on the island. And I think where everything's getting more and more crowded, having a little space is a good thing. And so the question is, does that mean I have a little space because I have a house on the edge of a cliff and it looks out across the Great Salt Lake? Or does that mean I got 2 or 3 extra trails that are good for recreation and ways to kind of enjoy what's already out there, right?
So if you pursued the parks type situation, eventually that would get turned over to Hooper City to maintain, correct?
Maybe, unless it's a state-run park or a privately funded park like Bouchard Gardens or something, right? Like, you never know. Right now,
it's not ever
we're in
going to be a
discussions
Bouchard Gardens.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just, I'm going along with my Walt Disney theme of this meeting of overdoing it. But the idea is, a wealthy person comes in and preserves it, takes care of it, so finds a way to interconnect and donate it either to the state or to Hooper, and then you have to manage it, right? But typically, most of the time when we do these, purchases, and there's a big endowment that's included, and that's, we're a ways away from that. But, in my mind, it's one or the other, right?
Or it can stay just
I don't
like
think
it
you can. Nothing stays like it is.
is.
Maybe.
Been that way for 150 years.
It's all right. I've seen things this year I never thought I would ever see.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay, that's all the questions I have for you, Zach.
Great. That's all I have for a presentation. If I got everybody covered, I think we're good.
Anybody else?
Are there any other comments anyone wants to make or have any questions, or are we good? Okay, seeing none, I take that as we're good. Everybody's had their questions answered. I think it's been a good discussion. I think it's given us an idea of what, well, we've narrowed it down to two ideas, right? Either kind of a park or a place to live, one or the other. So I think, okay. All right, so having said that, are there any other questions? If not, we'll just, I guess we'll conclude.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone, for being on.
Bye.
Mayor,
Yes.
what would be a realistic time that we could get some feedback from the city?
Well, I think if we had a work session from the Planning Commission and a work session with the City Council, so that would be over the course of the next 3 weeks, something like that. Now, when you want the feedback as to which direction we think would be, Hooper would be more in support of, whether it be a park or a residential area. That's our option? That's kind of what we're looking at. Is that right?
I think so, because I don't think it works being in the middle, right?
Well, I would agree with you. It wouldn't work being in the middle of that. If it took up to 12 to 15,000 residences that actually live out there, I mean, that's bigger than Hooper, the mainland of Hooper is today as far as population. So that, or a park that people could go out and enjoy the natural resources of Fremont Island. I would think it's one or the other.
Yeah. So that'd be great to know. Yeah, that'd be good. So
I think given those two choices, it shouldn't take a whole lot of time for Hooper to give you some feedback on what we would feel would be the better direction for the city.
perfect. And for us, I think if we can just get a non-public response to what your thoughts are, that's great for us. And then we'll go back and kind of digest that internally between the partners, and we'll get back to you with how we plan to go forward, if that's okay.
Okay, explain to me what you mean by a non-public response. In other words, you would want to keep this in-house rather than bring it, have any discussion with the citizens of Hooper. Is that right?
That's right. Because I think if you said, hey, we want it to be a park, I'm going to spend some time trying to convince some partners that this shouldn't be a development and that this is how they get some of their money back or all of it, right? And that'll take me a minute just because. And so that's why I'm asking for that. So, because that way, if there was great desire for it to be a park, I'd have to go, you know, I'm going to have to figure out how that actually turns into a good idea for the owners, right?
Okay, I think that's fair. I think that's good.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your time. This is super helpful. I kind of wish we could do every deal where we just get to sit down and talk it out. It would be a lot better. So.
Well, I think it's always good. The catch-22 to all that is you just can't always foresee the end result from the beginning. Sometimes we can.
Never.
Something like this is a little bit of a moving target in my mind. So
you got that right. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor.
Cool. Thanks. Have a good day.
okay, thank you.